A few hours ago, Christopher Adebayo was one of the richest men in the nation. Now, disguised as a poor, homeless man, he was being dragged out of his own restaurant by his own employees. He was accused, humiliated, and treated like nothing, until one kind waitress changed everything. This is one story you do not want to miss. So grab your popcorn, hit that subscribe button, and get ready, because this tale will have you holding your breath until the very end. Christopher Adebayo lived in a world above the clouds. At only 34 years old, he commanded an empire from the 42nd floor of a glass tower that overlooked the beautiful Victoria Island. From oil refineries to luxury hotels, shipping lines to telecom networks, the Johnson Group bore his signature of power. But behind the glossy smiles, the awards, and the headlines, Christopher wrestled with a haunting truth. He had never known who truly respected him. People bowed at his presence, laughed at his jokes, and praised his decisions, but deep inside, he could never tell if it was respect or just fear of his money. The doubt ate at him. At charity galas, at board meetings, even in quiet moments in his office, one question refused to die. If I had nothing, would anyone still treat me with dignity? One Tuesday evening, as the Lego sun melted into streaks of orange, Christopher made a decision that would change his life forever. He called in his longtime assistant, Janet. "I want to see the truth," he told her, his voice calm but firm. "I don't want the polished version they show me. I want to see my empire from the eyes of the poor. Tomorrow I will walk into Blue Castle, disguised as a man with nothing." Janet stared at him in disbelief. "Sir, that's dangerous. What if someone recognizes you?" "No one will," Christopher replied, "and if they do, then maybe I'll finally have my answer." By Friday evening, the transformation was complete. Gone was the billionaire in tailored suits. In his place stood a ragged figure in torn jeans, a dirty jacket, and sandals held together with tape. His perfectly combed hair was now unkempt, his face smudged with dirt. Even he could barely recognize himself. His assistant dropped him off at the corner. As he walked the street to the restaurant, he could feel the judgment. People avoided him. Some crossed the road entirely when they saw him coming. A woman pulled her purse closer to her body, and a man almost pushed him away. Christopher had never experienced anything like this. In his world, people usually rushed to greet him. They smiled and bowed. They treated him like royalty. This was the opposite. He was invisible, a lowlife, seen as a problem to be avoided. As he approached Blue Castle, the restaurant's glass doors opened to reveal rich and elegant spaces filled with the aroma of pepper soup, intercontinental dishes, and expensive wine. The chandeliers, the beautiful lights, the sweet air from the air-conditioned room made it all feel like a fairy tale. Soft high-life music drifted from hidden speakers. The hostess, a tall, dignified woman in her 30s named Chelsea, wore a perfectly tailored black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She was arranging menus when she looked up and saw him approaching. Her face changed immediately. The professional smile she wore for wealthy customers disappeared. She looked him up and down, taking in his shabby appearance with barely concealed disgust. Her smile returned, but it was bright and fake. "Can I help you?" she asked with audible rudeness in her voice. "I would like a table, please," Christopher said with a very soft and calm voice. She hesitated, looking him up and down again. She could see her thinking, what would a wretch want in a place filled with well-dressed elites and billionaires? "Do you have a reservation?" she finally asked, tapping her long nails on the podium. "No, I don't," he replied, maintaining his humble manner. "Sir, we're typically fully booked on Friday nights. Our weekends are usually reserved by very important people." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Let me see what I can do." She tapped her tablet, pretending to check for available tables. Her movements were slow and deliberate, showing what an enormous inconvenience his request was. She sighed loudly and shook her head several times. "Sir, I can seat you at the last row near the bathroom entrance. That's all we have available," she said, not looking at him. Christopher knew this was a lie. He had designed this restaurant. He knew exactly how many tables were empty on a typical Friday evening, but he nodded and followed her. The last row was the worst section in the house, reserved for people deemed unworthy. The table was small and wobbly. The lighting was dim. The smell from the nearby bathroom was noticeable. It was where they put customers they didn't want but couldn't turn away. As he followed her to his table, the other customers paused their conversations. Their eyes followed him with curiosity, mixed with disdain. He heard whispers. "How did he get in here? Security should have stopped him at the door. This place has lost its standards." He felt their judgment like a physical weight pressing down on him. But he could do nothing about it. This was his creation. This was the kind of business he owned, a place that measured human worth by the clothes people wore and the money in their accounts. From his corner table, dressed in poor, ragged clothes, Christopher observed every part of the restaurant with growing unease. He watched how the waiters moved with calculation, treating tables with wealthier customers much better. They smiled more, spoke more politely, checked on them more often. They ignored the less wealthy tables for long periods. It was during his observation that he saw the manager, a slick man in a perfectly tailored suit named Michael Taiwo. Michael was everything Christopher had fought all his life to avoid. He was a sycophant, someone who was only nice to people because they were rich or important, someone who stayed around only as long as he could get something from them. Christopher watched as Taiwo moved between tables like an actor on stage. At a table of government officials and politicians, Michael laughed loudly, clapping backs and sharing jokes. He pretended to be interested in their conversations, asking about their families, their work, their opinions on everything. He called them "Sir" and "Excellency," and made sure their glasses never went empty. But the moment he turned away from their table, his smile vanished. It was replaced by a cold, calculated expression. He would bark sharply at passing staff members who flinched and hurried away. His voice would change completely when speaking to employees, becoming harsh and demanding. It was a perfect performance designed to impress the wealthy customers while terrorizing the staff. Christopher felt sick watching it. After an hour of being completely ignored, a waitress finally approached his table. Unlike the others, she seemed different, softer, kinder, almost fragile. She was young, perhaps in her mid-20s, with intelligent brown eyes that held no judgment. Her uniform was clean, but showed its age. The white apron was faded at the creases from many washings. Her black shoes were cracked and worn, held together with careful stitching. But she carried herself with dignity. "Good evening, sir. I'm Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. What can I get you to drink?" she said politely. Her voice was gentle and genuine. There was no fake sweetness, no condescension, no impatience. She spoke to him the same way she had seen her speak to the wealthy customers at other tables. Christopher decided to test her. He ordered the cheapest beer on the menu, watching carefully for any sign of judgment or disappointment. But there was none. Her expression didn't change. Her tone remained steady and genuinely kind, treating him with the same respect she would give any other customer. "I'll get that right away for you, sir," she said, with a real smile. When Sarah returned with his beer, she set it down carefully and pulled out her notepad. "And what food would you like this evening, sir?" This was the moment Christopher had been waiting for. He decided to make a calculated move that would test everything about this place and this person. "I'll have the pepper soup," he said calmly. Sarah's professional composure faltered for the briefest moment. She had expected him to order something more affordable, but the pepper soup, though the cheapest dish on the menu, still cost 200,000 naira, more than what most people earned in a month. Her eyes widened slightly before she forced herself back into control. It was not something a man in a faded shirt and torn sandals ever ordered. She glanced instinctively at his scuffed shoes, then back to his calm, unreadable face. Her mind was racing. Was this a joke? Was he testing her? What would happen if this man couldn't pay for his meal? Would she be held responsible? She had a choice: embarrass him by suggesting something else, or trust her instincts about this quiet, strange man who carried himself with unexpected confidence. "That is an excellent choice, sir," she said, her voice steady. "Would you like anything else with that?" "I'll have another beer." The combined order was already more than he could afford. Sarah looked into his eyes again. There was something about him, something confident and knowing, that told her to trust him. Despite his appearance, despite where he was sitting, despite every logical reason to doubt him, she believed he could pay. "Right away, sir," she said with another genuine smile. As soon as she entered the order into the computer system, the silent alarms went off. The system automatically flagged any order that seemed too poor to cover, sending an alert directly to Michael, the manager. Michael was at the bar, charming a table of oil executives, when his phone buzzed with the alert. He looked at the screen and his face went red with anger. He excused himself from his conversation and intercepted Sarah near the wine station. His body blocked her path, and he leaned in close, speaking in a harsh whisper. "Are you completely insane? Did you see that man, that beggar sitting in the corner? He looks like he crawled out of the gutter after living there for months. Who gave you permission to serve him anything, let alone a 200,000 naira meal?" "I'm sorry, sir," she replied, keeping her voice low. He didn't seem like the type to be joking around. He was very confident about his order. "I didn't want to insult a guest by assuming he couldn't pay." "Insult a guest? He's insulting us by being here. He's insulting every real customer in this restaurant. Who even let him through the front door in the first place?" His breath was hot on her face. "When he runs out without paying, that entire 200,000 naira comes out of your salary. Every last kobo. Do you understand me?" Sarah's heart sunk. 200,000 naira was more money than she would make in 2 months. If this man couldn't pay, she would be in serious trouble. Without saying another word, Michael turned and marched toward table 12, where the homeless man was sitting quietly, waiting for his meal. "Sir," Michael said, his voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately. We are unable to fulfill your order." Christopher looked up at him calmly. "If it's about the money, I can pay. I have the money with me." Michael laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. It was sarcastic and cruel, designed to humiliate. Several customers turned to watch the scene. "Sir, nobody here wants your wretched change. Do you understand me? We don't serve your type here. A poor wretch like you has no business in a place like this. You're making our real customers uncomfortable." Christopher tried to reason with him. "I understand your concern, but I can assure you that I can pay for my meal, if you just let me show you." But before he could finish speaking, Michael had already signaled to the security guards near the entrance. "We have a right to refuse service to anyone, and we will not serve you," Michael announced loudly. "Gentlemen, please escort this man out through the back. I don't want our guests to see any more of this embarrassment." Christopher felt a cold shock run through his body. Even dressed as a poor man, even prepared for discrimination, the reality of it hit him harder than he expected. The security guards approached his table, and every eye in the restaurant was on him. Even as he was being led toward the back exit, he could see how the other customers made efforts to avoid the commotion. Some turned their backs, others whispered among themselves. He could even recognize a few people from his office building, business associates he had met at conferences, but no one said anything. After all, he was just a poor man with nobody to fight for him. Through the back door, the security men pushed him roughly into the dirty alley behind the restaurant. He stumbled and fell, landing near the dumpster where the restaurant threw its garbage. The smell was overwhelming. Flies buzzed around rotting food scraps and empty bottles. He sat there surrounded by trash, feeling for the first time in his life what it meant to be powerless. This was what it felt like to be treated as less than human, to have your dignity stripped away in front of a room full of people who saw you as nothing. Just as he sat there reflecting on these painful thoughts, the back door opened. It was Sarah, the kind waitress from earlier. She rushed to where he was sitting, not caring about the dirty environment or the smell. "I am so sorry for the way they treated you," she said, kneeling down beside him. She used her handkerchief to clean his hands and forehead, which had been bruised from the rough handling by the security guards. "Here, take this," she said, pulling a piece of meat pie from her apron. "This is all I have right now, but if you can wait until after my shift ends, I'll bring you some proper food." She looked genuinely upset about what had happened. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. "You didn't deserve that," she continued. "No one deserves to be treated like that, no matter what they look like or how much money they have." Before Christopher could respond, someone inside called her name loudly. She looked toward the door with fear in her eyes. "I have to go, but I'll be back," she promised, hurrying toward the restaurant. Christopher was so touched that he couldn't even speak. Who was this stranger who was so kind to him? Why was she being nice when she had nothing to gain? He didn't look like royalty or a famous person, and yet she cared enough to bring him food and tend to his injuries. He ate the meat pie slowly, savoring not just the taste, but the kindness behind it. It was the first genuine human connection he had felt in longer than he could remember. But his peace was soon disturbed. He could hear Michael, the manager, yelling at someone inside the restaurant, and the sound was coming through the storage room window. Curious and concerned, he arranged some wooden crates against the wall, climbed up, and peered through the window. He could see Michael towering over Sarah in the storage room. The manager's face was red with anger, and he was pointing his finger at her face. "How dare you embarrass me like that, serving that homeless man in a restaurant like this? Do you know what kind of establishment this is? Do you know the kind of people who eat here?" He leaned closer, his bad breath hitting her face. "You're already drowning in debt to me, Sarah. You're always trying to be smart, always thinking you know better than me. If you keep this attitude up, I will completely destroy you. I'll make sure you never work in this city again." Michael turned and left, slamming the door behind him. Sarah stood alone in the storage room, her shoulders shaking. Fear shot through her like ice water. Christopher could see her distress, even from outside the window. Michael had been threatening her ever since she started working at the restaurant, but Christopher didn't know the full story. Months earlier, Michael had discovered a minor error Sarah had made when processing a customer's payment. It was easily correctable, but in Michael's hands, it became a weapon. He had cornered her in his office, accusing her of theft and threatening to have her fired and blacklisted throughout Lagos's restaurant industry. Then he had offered his deal. She could spend the night with him, or 50% of her salary would go to him for an entire year. When she refused his advances, he implemented the second option. Her paychecks were slashed in half, and all her tips were monitored and shared with him. She had become his indentured servant, trapped by his threats and her desperate need for income. Sarah wiped her tears, straightened her uniform, and left the storage room. She had work to finish. Christopher had seen enough. He climbed down from the crates, his mind racing with anger and disgust. This was the cruel world that existed behind the smiles, expensive wines, and gourmet meals. This was what his empire had created. After waiting for over an hour, Sarah finally came back outside, carrying a plate covered with a cloth napkin. "I brought you some rice and chicken," she said, sitting down on one of the crates beside him. "It's not fancy, but it's good and hot." They sat there together in the alley, sharing the simple meal. For Christopher, it was the best food he had tasted in years, not because of its quality, but because of the love and sacrifice behind it. "You don't have to stay with me," he said gently. "You must be tired after your shift." "I don't mind. Besides, it's not safe for you to be alone out here at night." After they finished eating, Christopher insisted on walking her home. It was during their long walk through the city of Lagos that he learned about this remarkable woman who had helped him. She told him about her life before working at Blue Castle, how she had been a brilliant student, top of her class in secondary school, how she had dreams of becoming an accountant, of starting her own business someday, how her parents had worked multiple jobs to save money for her university education. "Everything changed when my parents died in a car crash 2 years ago," she said quietly as they walked through the dimly lit streets. "My extended family swooped in like vultures the moment they heard about the inheritance. They took the house, the savings, even my mother's jewelry. They said I was too young to manage money properly." She laughed bitterly. "They left me with nothing. No home, no money for school, nothing. I had to drop out of university in my final year and find work immediately." "Why Blue Castle?" Christopher asked. "It was the only place that would hire me without experience. The pay isn't great, but it's enough to rent a small room and buy food. I've been trying to save money to go back to school, but—" She trailed off, thinking about Michael's threats and the money he stole from her salary. "I keep telling myself it's temporary, that someday I'll finish my degree and get a better job, but some days it feels impossible." As they walked, Christopher noticed something about Sarah that impressed him beyond her kindness. Despite everything she had been through, despite the way she was treated at work, she hadn't become bitter. She still saw good in people. She still had hope. When she asked him about his own story, about how he ended up on the streets, Christopher began to stammer. He had no street stories, no tales of hardship or survival. He was a rich kid who had known luxury his entire life. He didn't know how to pretend to be homeless convincingly. It's complicated," he said nervously. "Maybe I can tell you some other time." Sarah sensed his discomfort and didn't push. Everyone had secrets, and she respected that. As they reached Sarah's neighborhood, a crowded area with small houses and narrow streets, she turned to him with a concerned expression. "Where will you sleep tonight? Do you have somewhere safe to go?" "I'll be fine," Christopher assured her. "Thank you for everything you've done. You're an angel." She smiled at that. "Take care of yourself. Maybe I'll see you again sometime." They said goodbye, and Christopher watched her disappear into a small building before turning to walk away. His heart was heavy with everything he had learned, but it was also filled with admiration for this young woman who had shown him what true kindness looked like. When he had walked a safe distance away, he pulled out his phone and called Janet. "It's time," he told his assistant. "Come pick me up." and tomorrow we start investigating Michael Taiwo." In the following days, Christopher launched a secret investigation. He hired private detectives and forensic accountants. He had computer experts secretly access Michael's files. What they discovered was horrifying beyond imagination. Michael, along with Chelsea, the hostess, had been systematically stealing from the company for over a year. They were skimming profits, buying expired food products for cheap and serving them to premium customers at full price, writing fake checks to vendors that didn't exist, and keeping the money for themselves. But worst of all, they had been exploiting and threatening multiple employees, not just Sarah. Michael had created a culture of fear where workers were too scared to report his behavior. One morning, before the sun had fully risen over Victoria Island, several black cars pulled up outside Blue Castle Restaurant. Christopher emerged wearing a flawless charcoal suit, flanked by police officers and security personnel. Michael, the manager, rushed out to greet what he assumed was a celebrity or high-ranking politician visiting the restaurant. His professional smile was bright and welcoming, but his expression changed the moment he recognized the face of his CEO. The blood drained from his face as he connected the powerful man before him with the mysterious homeless customer from days earlier. Mr. Adebayo," Michael stammered, his hands beginning to shake. "Sir, what brings you here so early?" Christopher's expression was cold and unforgiving. "I think you know exactly why I'm here, Michael." Michael began shaking nervously as he led them into the restaurant and toward his office. His mind was racing, trying to figure out how much his boss knew, hoping against hope that this was about something entirely different. Inside his poorly organized office, Christopher walked directly to the bookshelf where Michael kept his files. "I need to see a list of all your suppliers, Michael, right now. Specifically, I want to know about the people you've been buying expired food from." Michael collapsed into his chair, his face pale and sweating. "Please, sir, I don't know what you're talking about. There must be some misunderstanding." "There's no need to lie anymore," Christopher said calmly. "I already know everything. The money laundering, the expired food, the fake vendor payments." He paused and looked directly into Michael's eyes. "And I know you've been blackmailing and threatening your staff." Christopher's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You are finished here, Michael. Completely finished." In a desperate, last-ditch effort, Michael tried to run. He jumped up from his chair and made for the door, but security was waiting. They caught him before he could take 3 steps. "Please, Mr. Adebayo," Michael pleaded as they held his arms. "I can explain everything. I can pay back the money. Please don't do this." But Christopher had already turned away. "Take him to the police station. I never want to see him again." As the officers led Michael away in handcuffs, Sarah appeared in the doorway. She had been called in early for what she thought was an emergency staff meeting. She looked at the pathetic, sobbing man who had terrorized her for months, now powerless and defeated. After Michael was gone, Christopher addressed the entire restaurant staff. He spoke about integrity, honesty, and treating all people with dignity, regardless of their appearance or social status. "This restaurant will be a place where everyone is welcome," he announced, "where all customers are treated with respect, and where all employees are valued and protected." After his speech, he turned to Sarah, who was still trying to process everything that had happened. "Sarah," he said, taking her hand gently, "I would like you to become the new manager of this restaurant. The company will cover all your expenses, including your education. You can finish your degree while you work, and will pay for everything." The room fell silent. Sarah stared at him in shock, unable to comprehend the complete transformation of her life happening in a single moment. I don't understand," she whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Why me?" "Because," Christopher said, with a warm smile, "you showed kindness to a stranger when you had nothing to gain from it. You stood up for what was right, even when it was dangerous for you. That's the kind of person I want running my restaurant." "Say you'll accept," he urged, kindly. "Yes," she whispered, the word filled with wonder and hope. "Yes, I accept." In the months that followed Sarah's promotion, her management style completely transformed the restaurant. She created an environment where staff felt respected and customers were welcomed regardless of their background or social status. Blue Castle became known not just for its excellent food, but for its exceptional service and inclusive atmosphere. And exactly 1 year after their first meeting in that dirty alley, Christopher proposed to Sarah. What had started as a chance encounter between a disguised billionaire and a kind waitress had grown into a beautiful love story built on mutual respect, genuine care, and shared values. Their wedding was held at Blue Castle, with all the restaurant staff in attendance. It was a celebration not just of their love, but of the power of kindness to change lives and transform businesses. Christopher had learned that true wealth wasn't measured in money, but in the quality of the relationships you build and the integrity with which you treat others. And Sarah had learned that sometimes, when you show kindness to a stranger, you might just be entertaining an angel unaware.